The children of the forest were in many ways the opposites of the giants. As small as children but dark and beautiful, they lived in a manner we might call crude today, yet they were still less barbarous than the giants. They worked no metal, but they had great art in working obsidian, what the small folk call dragon glass, while the Valyrians knew it by a word meaning frozen fire, to make tools and weapons for hunting. They wove no cloths, but were skilled in making garments of leaves and bark. They learned to make bows of weirwood and to construct flying snares of grass, and both of the sexes hunted with these. Though the children of the forest did not possess the physical strength of the giants or the crude but efficient weaponry of the first men, they had gifts of their own. They were swift, nimble, and elusive, slipping through the dense woods as easily as shadows dancing in the moonlight. Their mastery of the land was unrivaled, and the deep forests of Westeros were as much their home as the halls of a castle were to a noble lord. It was said that a child of the forest could traverse a dense thicket, or scale a sheer cliffside as naturally as a man walked upon a road. No trail was unfamiliar to them, no secret glen beyond their knowing. They were known to be excellent hunters, and their survival skills were unmatched. They tracked their prey silently, their feet making no more sound than the falling of leaves. Their arrows, tipped with dragonglass, struck true more often than not, and they were known to take down prey with a single shot. Unlike men who hunted for sport or power, the children only took what they needed from the land. They honored the spirits of the beasts they slew, whispering soft words of thanks as the life left their bodies. Some legends say that the children could communicate with the animals of the woods, that they could soothe a wounded deer with a single touch, or call a flock of crows to their aid with nothing more than a whistle. Their song and music were said to be as beautiful as they were, but what they sang of is not remembered, save in small fragments handed down from ancient days. Maester Childer's Winter's Kings, or the legends and lineages of the Starks of Winterfell, contains a part of a ballad alleged to tell of the time Brandon the Builder sought the aid of the children while raising the wall. He was taken to a secret place to meet with them, but could not at first understand their speech, which was described as sounding like the song of stones in a brook, or the wind through leaves, or the rain upon the water. The manner in which Brandon learned to comprehend the speech of the children is a tale in itself, and not worth repeating here, but it seems clear that their speech originated, or drew inspiration from, the sounds they heard every day. It was said that their songs could stir the heart of even the fiercest warrior, that their music carried a haunting beauty that lingered in the air long after the last note had faded. Some accounts claim that their voices could charm the wind itself, making the leaves tremble with their harmonies. There were even whispers that the green seers among them, the most gifted of their kind, could sing to the WeirWoods and receive answers in return, that the trees themselves would whisper their secrets in response to the ancient melodies. The gods the children worshipped were the nameless ones that would one day become the gods of the first men, the innumerable gods of the streams and forests and stones. It was the children who carved the WeirWoods with faces, perhaps to give eyes to their gods, so that they might watch their worshippers at their devotions. Others, with little evidence, claim that the green seers, the wise men of the children, were able to see through the eyes of the carved WeirWoods. The supposed proof is the fact that the first men themselves believed this. It was their fear of the WeirWoods spying upon them that drove them to cut down many of the carved trees and weirwood groves, to deny the children such an advantage. Yet the first men were less learned than we are now, and credited things that their descendants today do not. The WeirWoods were the holiest of all things to the children of the forest. These ancient trees, with their bone-white bark and blood-red leaves, were thought to be the physical embodiment of their gods. They believed that when a face was carved into a weirwood, the spirit of the tree awakened, granting it the power to watch and listen. The red sap that seeped from the cuts in the bark was said to be the blood of the gods themselves, flowing through the land like veins through a body. The first men would later come to fear these trees, believing that the children watched them through the carved faces, whispering their secrets to the gods. But to the children, the WeirWoods were sacred, not as spies, but as keepers of memory. It was said that every whisper, every prayer, every tear shed beneath their branches was absorbed by the trees, held forever within their ancient roots. Through the WeirWoods, the children of the forest remembered. Some claim that the Greenseers had the ability to look through the eyes of the WeirWoods, seeing all that transpired in their presence. If this was true, then the children possessed a power unlike any other in the world, for they could see without being seen, hear without being heard. Others dismiss this as mere legend, claiming instead that the first men, in their ignorance, saw sorcery, where there was only the natural wisdom of a people deeply attuned to the land. This is not to say that the Greenseers did not know lost arts that belong to the higher mysteries, such as seeing events at a great distance or communicating across half a realm, as the Valyrians, who came long after them, did. But mayhaps some of the feats of the Greenseers have more to do with foolish tales than truth. They could not change their forms into those of beasts, as some would have it, but it seems true that they were capable of communicating with animals in a way that first men cannot achieve. It is from this that legends of skin changers, or beastlings, arose. There are those who believe that the greatest Greenseers were not merely dreamers or mystics, but wielders of a deeper power, able to see through time itself. They were said to dream of events yet to come, to glimpse the fates of kings and heroes before they were ever born. Some of these dreams, if the tales are to be believed, were passed down through the ages, their warnings unheeded by men who had long since forgotten the voices of the past. Yet no matter the truths of their arts, the children were led by their Greenseers, and there is no doubt that they could once be found from the lands of always winter to the shores of the summer sea. They made their homes simply, constructing no holdfasts or castles or cities. Instead, they resided in the woods, in crannogs, in bogs and marshes, and even in caverns and hollow hills. It is said that in the woods they made shelters of leaves and withes up in the branches of trees, secret tree towns. It has long been held that they did this for protection from predators such as direwolves or shadowcats, which their simple stone weapons, and even their vaunted Greenseers, were not proof against. But other sources dispute this, stating that their greatest foes were the giants, as hinted at in tales told in the north, and as possibly proved by Maester Kennet in the study of a barrow near the Long Lake, a giant's burial with obsidian arrowheads found amidst the extant ribs. It brings to mind a transcription of a wildling song in Maester Herrick's history of the Kings Beyond the Wall, regarding the brothers Gendel and Gorn. They were called upon to mediate a dispute between a clan of children and a family of giants over the possession of a cavern. Gendel and Gorne, it is said, ultimately resolved the matter through trickery, making both sides disavow any desire for the cavern, after the brothers discovered it was a part of a greater chain of caverns that eventually passed beneath the wall. But considering that the wildlings have no letters, their traditions must be looked at with a jaundiced eye. The beasts of the woods and the giants were eventually joined by other, greater dangers, however. According to the most well-regarded accounts from the Citadel, anywhere from 8,000 to 12,000 years ago, in the southernmost reaches of Westeros, a new people crossed the strip of land that bridged the narrow sea and connected the eastern lands with the land in which the children and giants lived. It was here that the first men came into Dorne via the broken arm, which was not yet broken. The first men were unlike anything the children had ever known. Where the giants were fierce but simple creatures, bound by the ways of the wild, and the children were subtle, weaving their magics in the shadows of the forests, the first men were a race of raw ambition, driven by a hunger to expand, to conquer, and to shape the land into their own vision. They were larger and stronger than the children, and they brought with them new ways of living, ways that would forever change the face of Westeros. Unlike the children, who lived in harmony with nature, the first men sought to tame it. They felled trees to make space for fields, diverting rivers to water their crops. They built villages with high wooden palisades, ring forts of earth and stone, and roads that cut through the wilderness, forging paths where none had existed before. Their knowledge of farming and animal husbandry allowed their numbers to grow swiftly, and as their population swelled, so too did their hunger for land. At first, the first men likely viewed the children as little more than another obstacle in their conquest of Westeros, no different from the beasts of the forests or the rocky hills that had to be cleared to make way for settlements. The first men did not recognize the sacred nature of the WeirWoods, nor did they understand the silent power that flowed through the roots of the ancient trees. To them, a weirwood grove was simply a space to be claimed, a source of timber to be used. The first of the first men to take an axe to a weirwood may have done so without a second thought, unaware that in doing so he had declared war on the unseen spirits that watched from the faces carved into the white bark. What does seem to be accurate from all the tales, however, is that the first men soon came to war with the children of the forest. Unlike the children, the first men farmed the land and raised up ring forts and villages, and in so doing, they took to chopping down the weirwood trees, including those with carved faces, and for this, the children attacked them, leading to hundreds of years of war. The first men, who had brought with them strange gods, horses, cattle, and weapons of bronze, were also larger and stronger than the children, and so they were a significant threat. The destruction of the WeirWoods was not merely an act of deforestation. It was, to the children, a sacrilege, an unforgivable crime against the gods themselves. The faces carved into the bark were not mere decoration, but conduits to the divine, the eyes and mouths through which the old gods observed and listened. When the first men put their axes to the sacred trees, they were not merely cutting wood. They were severing the link between the children and the spirits that guided them. This, more than anything, was what drove the children to war. The hunters among the children, their wood dancers, became their warriors as well, but for all their secret arts of tree and leaf, they could only slow the first men in their advance. The Green Seers employed their arts, and tales say that they could call the beasts of marsh, forest, and air to fight on their behalf, direwolves and monstrous snow bears, cave lions and eagles, mammoths and serpents, and more. But the first men proved too powerful, and the children are said to have been driven to a desperate act. The war between the first men and the children of the forest was unlike any other. It was not fought in great pitched battles between vast armies, but in a manner far more suited to the nature of both peoples. The first men, though fierce warriors, were accustomed to open battle, to clashing ranks of warriors wielding swords and shields. The children, by contrast, fought as the forest itself fought, through stealth, misdirection, and the slow, inevitable reclaiming of all things by nature. Many legends tell of the horrors the children unleashed in their struggle against the first men. It is said that rivers swelled overnight, drowning entire settlements beneath their sudden floods, and that thick mists rose from the earth, swallowing villages whole, so that when the dawn came, not a trace of them remained. Some accounts even claim that the children whispered to the trees, causing roots to burst from the ground, dragging men into the dark earth, their screams muffled beneath the soil. But the first men were resilient. They adapted, as men always do, and they struck back. Fire became their greatest weapon, a force that even the magic of the children could not easily counter. Entire forests were set ablaze, weirwood groves reduced to ash, their sacred faces blackened and broken. As the years passed, the first men pushed further and further into the lands once ruled by the children, driving them from their ancient homes, cutting down their sacred trees, and forcing them into retreat. For centuries, the war raged. No one can say how many died, for the children did not record history in books, and the first men, at this time, had not yet developed their own system of writing. But even in those days, it is likely that the war was remembered in songs and stories, passed down from one generation to the next. Eventually, the war reached a stalemate. Though the first men were stronger and more numerous, the children still had their magic, and they fought with the desperation of a people facing extinction. At last, Both sides came to understand that neither could claim total victory without suffering ruin themselves, and so, out of necessity rather than goodwill, peace was sought. The details of how the peace was brokered are lost to time, but what is known is that the leaders of the first men and the green seers of the children of the forest met upon the Isle of Faces, the sacred island that lay in the great lake known as the God's Eye. There, beneath the watchful gaze of the WeirWoods, they forged the Pact, an agreement that would end the war and bring about an uneasy peace. Under the terms of the Pact, the first men were granted dominion over the open lands, plains, hills, and rivers, while the children would keep the deep forests as their own. More importantly, the first men swore to cease their destruction of the WeirWoods, to no longer put their axes to the sacred trees. In return, the children laid down their weapons and withdrew into the remaining forests, choosing to live in isolation rather than continue their struggle. With the Pact, the Dawn Age came to an end, and the Age of Heroes began. The first men, though still divided among themselves, began to form the early kingdoms that would one day shape Westeros. The children, meanwhile, faded from history, their numbers dwindling, their presence growing ever fainter. Though the war had ended, the legacy of the children of the forest lived on. Their old gods remained, worshipped in the north, even as the Andals brought their seven across the narrow sea. Their magic lingered in the land, whispers of their power found in the deepest woods and the most ancient stones, and some say that they still exist, hidden away in the last great forests, watching, waiting, their eyes ever open in the faces of the WeirWoods. Their time as rulers of Westeros had passed, but their story had not yet reached its true conclusion.